Hey, welcome back. So it's been a few days waiting on parts. I ordered tons of fuses and we're gonna dive back into these because there are a few things that I wasn't able to get fixed without borrowing parts from one of my other jukeboxes. So I bought tons of stuff so that I don't have to wait again. So if you remember, I blew a fuse in the amp and I borrowed a fuse from a different jukebox to fix it. Now here's where that fuse comes out. You see how there's wire here and here? So what I'm gonna do today, because these fuses are getting harder and harder to come by, you gotta find kind of a specialized source. This one is a 1 amp fuse, so it's a little easier to come by. This one, however, which is the digital control center, this one takes, I think, was it 3.2? 3.2, which is also becoming difficult to find. So I am going to do the same thing effectively that was done here. Those two wires jumped up to this board, which is kind of where the connections for that fuse went. This one's a little bit more of a straight shot right to those legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these wires off back a little bit, so if you ever wanted to go back to the original, you could. But I'm going to cut them back a little bit, and I'm going to mount a fuse down here. In fact, just like that one. So I'm going to kind of copy that idea. The other thing I didn't get finished was this board. And I believe it's the auto speed. Now, a year after this was made, I think they came out with the DCC 3, Digital Control Center 3. And that disappeared. It's not in that control unit. But I do need to replace these capacitors. I know a couple of them are bad. I could not find this one. So we're just going to hope it's good. I'll put a meter on it and see if I can get it to show me anything. But I need to... I'm going to replace these two fuses. These are supposed to be 0.8 of an amp. So if you're shopping for them, that's 800 milliamps. So that's how you replace those. There's another fuse under this board back here, and it's a 1/4 amp. Or excuse me, 1/8 of an amp. 1/8 amp blow, slow-blow fuse. So I'm going to double check that one while I have this thing out, just to make sure that that's what's in there. I didn't look when I rebuilt it. I should have, but I didn't. So I'm going to take these two guys back out, finish the capacitors on that one, rig up a fuse in this one, and then we'll put them back in. I don't think... It very well could. This capacitor in my Matador, along with its partner right here, were bad, and I was having problems with it scanning twice and not picking up a record. So perhaps that scan issue, if you can remember how it scans, you know, 2, 3, 4 times, and then parks. I'm hoping that after doing this, it will just scan down, look for a song, scan back, scan down, stop. The other thing that I've done down here, if you can remember, is it would scan and it would get all the way over here and just kind of for a split second and then start coming back. So I adjusted those two little screws just a little bit. You can see where it used to be. Well, that's about how far over the track went actually to the left. So I had to move this to the right, which you would think if you moved it to the left, that would have to follow too, but I think it was out of adjustment anyways. So it no longer does that. There's an adjustment in the manual if you go through it. It's probably worth it if you take it all the way out like I did. It's probably worth it to go through all of the adjustments for all of these things and the track. But, you know, we kind of knew it was picking up records just fine and spitting them back out. So I could get to most of the oiling points over here without ripping it all apart, and everything looked to be pretty well lubricated. One thing I did forget to mention though too, see this? That's a spot where you can pour some oil into, and then clear down here at the bottom. Try to zoom in. See it? See those two places? This one clear down here. So you put oil in those as well. The bummer with this, they're supposed to have caps that hook on back here and just sit over them with a spring so that nothing can fall down in there. Both the caps are gone. I don't think this thing got just sprayed with dry lubricant like that guy was telling me. Doesn't look like it anyways. But maybe that's the spot that they had to keep coming into and lubricating up. That resistor, I ordered a new one only because I cannot get that electrical tape off. It's petrified. So I'm just cutting the wires and putting a new one on there. If I remember right, it's a 5,000 ohm, 10 watt ceramic resistor. And they get super hot, so you cannot wrap them with electrical tape like that, or that's exactly what will happen. It was probably stinking and smoking as it melted. And then we'll just see what else we've got time for, I guess. Those are the two things I'm going to try to tackle this evening. And then we'll see if that remedied anything, and we'll move on to the next steps. But we're getting closer and closer to being finished. All right, we're all set up with the amp. So what we're going to do, here's the fuse of the bottom side of the amp of that, what is it called, a GMQ fuse, 1 amp. So this wire runs down, connects to this lug right here. The transformer is on the back side of this, so it comes in, runs through here, and then connects again over here on this lug. So instead of dinking around and taking all of this loose, what I'm going to simply do is I'm going to cut the wires here for the fuse. Leave them long enough, I suppose, you know, so if you ever wanted to come back and put it back the way it was, you could. But I'm going to cut here, and then I'm going to install one of these. And I'll do it just like the other one was. I'm going to mount it, you know, down here somewhere, out of the way where it can't touch anything, or maybe over here on the side, I guess, but I'm thinking it's probably going to go down here just like the other one was. And I'll just solder all these wires together, and then that way I can just use a 1 amp fuse in here. And then for the cap on the other side, basically that fuse that we saw taped together had those 2 copper wires on the outside of it linking it. I'll take that fuse and just essentially break that piece of it off, the glass and the rest of the fuse off of it. That way if it blows again and maybe I'm not the one that owns this jukebox anymore, if you take that cap off and look, there won't be a fuse in there. So you'll have to wonder, well, how could it work if that fuse wasn't there? Maybe it got cut, and that will at least lead you to the back. That's what happened to me when I was looking at the digital control center. It had one of those, but it was completely empty, which led me to go look for another fuse or to see if they just hardwired it. So that's what I'll do. Again, solder it to each side of this with a 1 amp fuse in the middle, and I'll mount it here on the side. So give me a second and we'll run through that. All right, and that's it. So it's soldered on each side. I put some heat shrink on here that I'll push up and over here in a second and burn in. But then I went and got some of these screws. And I'll use a kind of a lock nut on the other end of it to hold it back. So it'll go somewhere right about there. So if you come searching for it, it'd be pretty easy to find. One would think. Is it recording? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. It's okay. Just helping get it out. And there you have it. So that just eliminates that fuse. And this is readily available. I mean, a 1 amp fuse, you could probably buy something like that at a hardware store, at O'Reilly's, or some auto parts store, I would think. It's a lot easier to get a hold of this than it is to get a hold of these. The best, cheapest deal I could find was $8 shipped. And that's kind of a lot, and you have to wait. So if it popped, you figured out your problem and you wanted to keep going, I mean, you might be waiting a week or more for that part to come in. So it's just a quick, cheap solution. And I think this was maybe $2. And this fuse was $1. So it's gonna have to blow 5-6 more times before you have the same money that you would have in this fuse. So we'll turn our attention over to the control unit, and I'll start switching out some capacitors in there. All right, so got them all replaced. This one was 1,000 UF. These two were 100 UFs, and that one was a 10. So I got all those done, and we're ready to throw this thing back in. I'll clean off those so that they're nice and shiny before I plug it back in. And then we'll get it back installed in the jukebox. We'll see if it behaves any differently. Hopefully it does. Back in the saddle again. Wow. All right, so uniform. We got 2 fuses on the inside. Everything else is tidy. I got all the capacitors that are lytic anyways in here replaced. It's all hooked back up. And we look pretty uniform, I think. On the outside, you wouldn't know any different. If you blew a fuse, you'd probably still come here first and look. But this is what you'll find, and that won't make any sense. Even the cap is the right one, right? 3.2. You'll have to take my word for it. But those just screw in, and then they'll stay there. Same with this. I'm having problems. Is it the fuse? Where'd it go? Well, that can't be it. I'll have to go look for it. And it's in the same spot, basically, on both of these units. So we should be leaving enough clues for the next guy. I mean, if somebody else gets to own this one, I might just keep this one forever. So, did it fix anything? That's the next question. So, I moved our see-through record, that yellow one, to 140. First question is, will it find it? It will. And it's playing it. And it sounds fine. There's still some crackliness to it. And these speakers up here kind of sound weird sometimes. Alright, let's cancel it. Good. So that works still. That was an issue we had the last time. And then if you'll see, I moved that switch so it doesn't hang up there like it was, which is good. Happy with that. And it parked. Ha! So maybe that 300 UF capacitor was really an issue. Now back to the speaker thing. So these are the horns, and these just shoot out just straight treble, right? And we've replaced everything in here. And so far I have this set on the maximum scratch. And when you do that, it takes a lot of the treble out of it. So I have the treble even back down a little bit, because if this was at high and this was on minimum, your ears would just be exploding and bleeding. It's miserable. There's a lot of crackliness to that. So I'm sitting here wondering, what could that be? You know, maybe the amp needs more help. And I'm not an amp guru, so once it starts getting into that stuff, I have to defer to someone who knows what they're doing, which means I have to spend more money, and I'll probably take that to somebody who can figure it out. Because I'll probably just get in here and throw parts at it, or I could take it to someone who knows what they're doing. They'll hook it up to their machine and go, oh, it's this over here, let's test that. Yep, this thing's bad. Throw a new one in. That part costs $6. I'll charge you $100 for my time, and off you go. Or I could sit here and throw $50 worth of parts and make the problem even more confusing for the next guy that's got to work on it, which then maybe the bill's $150 when it comes back. You know, they had no new parts, but they had to swap everything around because they did it backwards. I don't know. So my thought was, what could be the issue? So what led me down that trail is, look what we got back there. A couple more capacitors. So this is the stereo network. And a lot of these Seeburgs have that, if not all of them, I guess. I don't know. The ones that I have, that one's got one. It's right inside the door on the bottom. And it's got it. Now those capacitors, I just swap them out quick, but those capacitors are bipolar or not polarized. So you either need film capacitors, and they make specific ones for audio systems, and man, what do they call that? It's some sort of filter. and a crossover filter maybe is what it is. I don't know. So I ordered a couple of those. Still waiting for those to come in the mail, so hopefully that shows up tomorrow. And then I can swap those out, and hopefully it cleans it up a little bit. Other than that, I mean, the needles are new. So, you know, I'm kind of running out of reasons that would be so scratchy. Now, the bass and, you know, the mid-range, there's not hardly any highs that go through that. But those sound great, and they don't sound distorted. It sounds good. Even on crappy records down there, it sounds okay. I mean, crappy records are going to make it sound worse, but it does sound as good as you can expect speakers that are 50-some years old and have been sitting for almost half their life not getting used. But I've got my fingers crossed hoping that that's the thing. We'll see. If not, we'll keep searching, but that'll be the next thing. One thing I did do, though, is I used deoxit on that volume pot. So as I kind of go through at the end, I'll kind of explain some of this stuff in more detail. But we've got it parking in 2 scans. There's no more caps left up there to replace. So it's really a short list. All right, I'm going to call it a night and wait for some more parts. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.